Have you ever considered that a simple bag of pistachios sitting in your pantry could actually be a fire hazard? It sounds like a tall tale, but for anyone who has spent decades maintaining a safe home, the reality is a bit chilling. Under the right conditions, these nuts can undergo spontaneous combustion and literally burst into flames. We aren't talking about a kitchen fire caused by a forgotten stove. We're talking about a chemical reaction where the pistachio's own oils generate enough heat to ignite without a single spark. Think about the cargo ships crossing the Atlantic right now. If they are carrying a massive haul of pistachios, they are treated with the same caution as a shipment of volatile chemicals. It's a terrifying thought for those of us who value the sanctuary of our homes, isn't it? We buy them because they're healthy, and we're told they're the smart snack for our heart and longevity. Yet we've been keeping a potential biological bomb right next to the cereal. But before you go clearing out your cupboards in a panic, you have to wonder, what is it about the specific DNA of a pistachio that makes it so uniquely dangerous compared to an almond or a walnut? And more importantly, if they are powerful enough to sink a ship, what exactly are they doing to your body once you crack that shell? When you reach into a bag and pull out a pistachio, you're certain of one thing: you're eating a nut. We've been told this for decades, but what if I told you that everything you know about that snack is a botanical lie? For those of us who have lived long enough to appreciate that things aren't always what they seem, the pistachio is the ultimate deceiver. In reality, it isn't a nut at all, it's a drupe. Now, that might sound like a technicality, but it's a distinction that changes how we should view our health and our safety. A pistachio is actually the inner seed of a fleshy fruit, making it a closer cousin to a peach, a cherry, or a mango than to a walnut or a pecan. Imagine a peach drying up until only the pit remains. That is essentially what you are cracking open. But here is where the danger links back to that fire hazard, because a drupe is designed to survive the harshest, most arid environments on Earth. The plant packs that tiny seed with a massive concentrated dose of oily fats to ensure the next generation has enough energy to grow. This survival oil is exactly what makes the pistachio so nutritious for your heart. But it's also the high-octane fuel that leads to spontaneous combustion. While a true nut has a different chemical makeup, the pistachio's identity as a drupe means it is a literal energy pod wrapped in a shell. This evolutionary miracle of storing high-density oils allows the plant to thrive in the desert. But when we harvest millions of these oil-rich pits and stack them together in a confined space, we aren't just storing food, we are stockpiling biological batteries. This botanical quirk is why the pistachio smiles or pops open on the tree. It's the plant's way of saying the oil levels are at their peak. It's a fascinating transition from a juicy fruit to a dry, combustible seed. And understanding this transformation is the only way to truly grasp why this snack is both a superfood for your brain and a potential hazard for a cargo ship. Now that we understand the pistachio is essentially a concentrated oil pod, we have to look at the terrifying physics of how that oil turns into an uncontrollable blaze. For anyone who has ever dealt with the sudden flare-up of a grease fire in the kitchen, you know that oil is a stubborn, aggressive fuel. But the pistachio doesn't even need a stove to get started. The process is a slow Minutean disaster called self-heating, and it begins the moment these seeds are packed too tightly together. Because they are so rich in polyunsaturated fats, the good fats we're told to eat for our cholesterol, they are incredibly chemically reactive. If these fats are exposed to even a tiny amount of moisture, they begin to decompose, and that microscopic breakdown releases a faint amount of heat. In a small bowl on your counter, that heat vanishes into the air. But in a large bag or a deep pantry shelf, the heat becomes stifling. It gets trapped deep within the pile, simmering invisibly. At this point, the smiling shell stops being a snack and starts acting like a tiny insulated oven, holding that heat in until the temperature reaches a critical, localized boiling point. Without a single spark or match, the pile can spontaneously ignite, creating a fire that is notoriously difficult to extinguish because the oil is fueled from within the seed itself. It's a sobering thought for those of us who prioritize a tidy, safe home. We assume fire needs a source, but the pistachio proves that nature can create its own flame out of thin air. But here is the real concern for the everyday snacker. Even if your pantry doesn't burst into flames, this same volatility is happening on a smaller scale every time you leave a bag open. That heat-seeking reaction leads to rancidity, turning those life-giving oils into toxic, bitter compounds that can actually cause inflammation in the body. We are dealing with a substance that is constantly trying to release its energy, whether through a fire in a warehouse or a chemical shift in your cupboard. It makes you wonder if these seeds are packed with enough volatile, high-pressure energy to sink a cargo ship. How did they ever become a symbol of royalty and luxury in the ancient world? If the pistachio is such a volatile, high-maintenance oil pod, why has humanity been obsessed with it for over 9,000 years? To understand that, we have to look back at a time when food wasn't just fuel, it was a weapon of survival. For those of us who appreciate the weight of heritage, the history of the pistachio is a masterclass in exclusivity and high-stakes agriculture. In the ancient deserts of the Middle East, this explosive seed was so highly prized that it was often reserved strictly for the elite. Legend has it that the Queen of Sheba herself decreed pistachios a royal food, effectively making it illegal for commoners to even possess them. Why such a heavy-handed law? Because the ancients recognized that the same concentrated combustible energy that makes a shipping container dangerous was, in their world, a literal lifesaver. To them, that high-octane oil was a rare burst of vitality that could sustain a traveler across a scorching, unforgiving landscape where other foods would simply rot or fail. They didn't fear the fire inside the shell, they craved it. They saw the smiling split as a sign of peak potency, a signal that the seed was bursting with enough biological power to keep a monarch's mind sharp and their body resilient. But as we move through our 40s, 50s, and beyond, we've learned that the true crown isn't a title, it's our health. We realize that the real luxury is maintaining our sharp wit and clear vision as the years tick by. This ancient royal obsession wasn't just about status. It was a primitive understanding of the pistachio's biological shield. You see, the very same antioxidants that evolved to prevent those volatile oils from turning rancid or self-heating on the tree are the exact compounds that protect your own cells from the fires of inflammation. They risked the desert heat and the volatility of the harvest because they knew something about longevity that we are only just beginning to prove in the lab. It turns out that the Queen of Sheba's forbidden fruit is actually a sophisticated defensive system for your aging brain, one that fights a different kind of internal fire every time you eat it. When we talk about the fire inside a pistachio, we aren't just discussing warehouse disasters, we're talking about the metabolic fires that happen inside your own head. As we cross the threshold of our 50s and 60s, many of us share a quiet, nagging insecurity. The fear of the mental fog or the slow fading of our peripheral vision. It's that subtle anxiety when you realize the evening news is getting just a little bit blurrier. Or when you struggle to find a word that was on the tip of your tongue just yesterday. This is where the pistachio's volatile chemistry becomes your greatest ally, to keep those high-octane oils from exploding or going rancid under the harsh desert sun. The pistachio plant developed an incredibly dense concentration of two specific pigments, lutein and zeaxanthin. You can actually see this medicine with the naked eye. It's that vibrant signature green and deep purple hue hidden under the skin. In the plant, these colors act as a cooling system, preventing the seed from self-destructing in the heat. In your body, they do something even more miraculous. They are the only antioxidants that migrate directly to the macula of your eye and the neurons of your brain, acting as a literal biological shield against blue light and cognitive decay. While other nuts are certainly healthy, the pistachio is essentially a specialized filter that mops up the oxidative stress, the internal smoldering that leads to age-related decline. It's a fascinating bit of irony. The very substance that makes this nut a fire hazard in bulk is what makes it a cognitive stabilizer in your diet. By consuming these flammable seeds, you are essentially importing the plant's own fear-extinguishing system to protect your memory and your sight. But this raises a practical concern that many of us face as our metabolism shifts in later life. If these nuts are so dense with high explosive energy and fats, aren't they going to be a disaster for our waistlines? You'd think so, but the reality of the pistachio paradox is that this is the only snack that actually forces you to slow down before you can ever overindulge. It seems like a cruel joke, doesn't it? We're told that this nut is a literal oil pod capable of fueling a fire. And yet, nutritionists call it the skinny nut. For those of us who have noticed that our metabolism isn't quite the roaring furnace it was in our 20s, the idea of eating something so energy-dense can feel like playing with dietary matches. We've all been there, standing in the kitchen, worried that a handful of snacks will immediately translate to extra weight around the middle. a stubborn area that becomes much harder to manage as the years pass. But here is where the pistachio paradox offers a massive sigh of relief. Despite their high-octane fat content, pistachios are one of the lowest-calorie nuts on the planet. But the real secret isn't just the calorie count. It's a fascinating bit of hidden science regarding their cell walls. You see, the pistachio is so structurally rigid that your body actually struggles to break down all its fats. This means a portion of that combustible oil passes through your system without ever being absorbed into your waistline. It's like a fuel tank with a selective filter. But even more important for those of us trying to stay disciplined is the shell factor. Think of the pistachio shell as a built-in speed bump for your appetite. In a world of mindless eating where you can disappear half a jar of peanuts before the first commercial break, the pistachio demands a ritual. You have to work for it. You have to crack that smiling exterior, a physical act that creates what psychologists call a visual receipt when you eat shelled nuts. The evidence vanishes into thin air, leaving your brain wondering if you've actually eaten at all. With pistachios, the mounting pile of empty shells stays on the plate, acting as a psychological stop sign that tells your brain you are full. In fact, studies show that people who have to peel their own nuts consume 41% fewer calories simply because they can see the evidence of their snacking. You're getting that explosive ancient energy, but it's released as a slow, steady burn that keeps you satiated and sharp without the mid-afternoon crash. However, before you rush out to buy the biggest bag you can find, we have to address a dark irony. The very same warm, moist conditions that cause these nuts to self-heat and catch fire are the exact same conditions that invite a silent, invisible predator into the shell, a hidden toxin that thrives on the pistachio's volatile nature. We've spent a lot of time discussing the fire you can see, but for those of us who have learned that the most significant risks in life are often the ones that stay hidden, we need to talk about a different kind of internal heat. There is a dark irony in the world of the pistachio. The very same warm, humid, and stagnant conditions that cause a pile of nuts to self-heat and spontaneously combust are the exact conditions that invite a silent, invisible predator called aflatoxin. This isn't just a bad batch or a bit of harmless mold. Aflatoxins are potent, naturally occurring toxins produced by fungi that thrive on the pistachio's rich, volatile oils. Now here's the part that should make you stop and think. Most of us assume that roasting or cooking our food makes it safe, but aflatoxins are notoriously heat. This means that even if a nut has been salted and roasted at high temperatures, the toxin remains active and dangerous. For those of us prioritizing our long-term health, our liver is a precious filter that we simply cannot afford to overload with dirty fuel. But don't let this turn your favorite snack into a source of fear. Instead, let it turn you into a more sophisticated consumer. Your best defense is actually hidden in the smile itself. Have you ever struggled with a pistachio shell that is completely tightly sealed? Most people grab a nutcracker or use their teeth to force it open, but that is a mistake. A completely closed shell often means the nut was immature when harvested, and these unsplit nuts are statistically much more likely to harbor mold and toxins. If the nut didn't smile on its own, it's nature's way of telling you it isn't ready for consumption. When you do crack one open, look for that vibrant green and purple we talked about. If the nut inside is dark, shriveled, or covered in a dusty, grayish powder, that is a distressed nut, a tiny red flag, indicating it was exposed to the moisture that triggers both the fire hazard and the toxin growth. By being selective and refusing to fight with closed shells, you are using your experience to filter out the danger. So, how do we take all this, the ancient history, the explosive chemistry, and the royal benefits, and turn it into a daily ritual that actually protects your future? To master this culinary firecracker, you only need to remember 3 things. First, respect the energy. That volatile oil that can sink a ship is the same high-octane fuel your heart and metabolism crave, provided you keep it cool, dry, and stable in your own home. Second, trust the protection. Those vibrant greens and purples aren't just for show. They are the biological extinguishers that keep your brain sharp and your vision clear as the decades pass. And finally, embrace the ritual. It is a rare thing in this world to find something that is as exciting as it is benefisto. Food that carries the thrill of a biological bomb and the quiet promise of a sharper tomorrow. You are now part of an elite group of snackers who know that the smiling shell is actually a safety valve, and that a closed shell is a door better left unopened. Treat your stash with the reverence of the Queen of Sheba, keep them in the fridge to stop the simmer of rancidity, and enjoy the slow, steady burn of ancient vitality. Now that you've seen the explosive truth hiding in your pantry, you'll never look at a simple bowl of nuts the same way again. But the pistachio is just the beginning of the story. There are other everyday items in your kitchen that are hiding equally bizarre, high-stakes secrets about how they affect your aging body. If you're ready to stop guessing and start mastering the science of your own kitchen, make sure to stick around. Because the more you know about the hidden fires in your food, the better you can protect the sanctuary you've worked so hard to build.